So I will intro myself and this prospect and do my best imitation of Michelle or Lisa. So this came about after the Powerhouse Pitch competition. We were talking a lot about some of the ways that folks go into it, how they pitch. And I was talking about how, as a small business banker, a lot of times we'll have conversations following up from a pitch competition or doing those things. And sometimes part of that becomes a little bit of like coaching around, hey, when the conversation goes to talk to other people that are not necessarily, I think the Powerhouse Pitch competition kind of models after maybe more of like what you would present to a venture capital company, someone that is going to invest and give you money and help grow your business. But the reality is, one, you should always be pitching, with low-key reference to the always be closing. Because the reality of it is you are always pitching. If you are a small business owner, for better or for worse, when you walk into a room, to a certain degree, you are pitching your business because you are very tied to your business. You are, you guys are intrinsically connected. And so what we talked about is the reality is whether you're engaged in a pitching competition or not, or you're not actively gearing up for that, you still are pitching. And there's a variety of ways that you want that pitch to be adjusted to set you up for success based on who you're having the conversation with. And so one of the ones that I'm really passionate about is the banker pitch, because I am a banker and I have a lot of these conversations. And I do think the more that people go into it and have already done the work to shift their pitch over to be prepared to talk to a banker, the faster we can move, the better we can go. And honestly, the more that we can avoid any sort of potential for hurt feelings or for misunderstandings, because fundamentally, banks are looking at different information than, say, someone looking to invest in your business would, or even someone just looking to purchase from or participate with your business. So that is the background of kind of how this conversation came about and what we're trying to gear up and how we're trying to set you up for success coming out of this. So, and Michelle, if I have skipped anything, and what I'll do, I'll go ahead and say a few housekeeping pieces. So one, we've got chat turned on for everybody. So you can chat back and forth with everybody. I think Michelle has been sending out invites to make you a panelist in the event that you would like to go on camera and participate. I do a lot of back and forth, and I'll ask a lot of questions. So if you are wanting to chime in or ask a question or do anything, you can use the chat the whole time long, especially like if I'm asking a question, asking to weigh in, getting opinions. If you've got a question that you kind of want dived into that you don't want us to skip over, you can put that in the Q&A because that'll stay up there until it gets answered. And I don't want it to get buried in the chat. So you can use either, and chat can definitely be fully participatory. So that is it for our housekeeping. And let me go ahead and set up my screen over here. Here we go. So we'll go ahead and kick off. And Michelle, if I forgot anything, you just jabber it in the chat and I will pick it up as best I can. Okay. And Michelle did give an assurance, so I'll send her the slides, and so you guys can have a copy of them after. I don't put a ton of information on my slides, so they may be more conversation prompters, and if you need any more in-depth information, I'm happy to follow up with it. But first off, I'll start off by introducing myself. I am Casey Mulligan. This is a lovely picture of me and my little toddler in the Meerkat Tunnel at the zoo. And I am a finance professional who I have spent more than the last 15 years working in things related to client service and a lot of that like relationship building. And then the last 10 years in particular has been spent in business banking, in particular small business banking. So I do a whole host of a lot of things because at Pinnacle, we like to wear a lot of hats. But in particular, I do small business banking, consumer banking, and I work on the community development team. So our goal in community development lending at Pinnacle is to, as much as we're able, to try and create equity in lending by connecting people to resources, by advocating and creating special programming that allows for folks to have a little bit more of a leg up, and to work really hard at trying to level that playing field. So honestly, being here today is one of those things, as far as making sure that everybody has as much information as possible so they can go in to conversations with bankers or lending really, really well armed and well prepared. I am also, as I put a note in here, a really big advocate for transparency and openness when it comes to banking and financial topics. I will tell you firsthand, my background is not perfect. Sorry, someone walked in and smiled at me. That I 10 years ago, when I was sitting down, or when I was trying to get into banking at Avenue Bank, I made it through 6 rounds of interviews, and at the very end of it, they were like, "We really want to hire you, but you have terrible credit, and that's kind of a problem for us." And I just felt my stomach like sink through, and I was like, "This is my one big chance to do what I have realized is a huge opportunity, my first chance to have a real career and do all of these pieces." And so I kind of made them a solemn vow that I would figure it out and I would get all of my stuff together and figure it out. And so I kind of clawed my way through. And so now I'm really passionate, one, about that not being such a scary process for so many people, and pulling back the curtain on some of the things that are secretive or move in ways we wouldn't expect. And so I'm pretty much an open book on that piece. But that is why I care so deeply about saying, none of this has to be so scary. Going to talk to a lender does not have to feel like, for better or for worse, going to the gynecologist, bearing your soul, and then kind of waiting for them to accept or reject you. I feel like it is feels like an equally vulnerable, intimate moment. And I want everybody to go in really knowing where they stand, knowing what they have, knowing what they're shooting for, and having more of like a collaborative conversation. So the first thing I'll say is a couple of common misconceptions. And we'll do a little bit more of a collaborative. Does anybody want to weigh in on what they think some of the key differences are between venture capital and bank lending?
I would like to, if you don't mind.
Yeah,
Venture capital, I believe, is people understanding what you're trying to do, believing in you as the vehicle, and kind of giving you their money for that. And then bank lending is like in the traditional sense, maybe. I don't know. I was just shooting at that.
Yeah, spot on. I will say, does anybody else want to? I thought I saw a hand go up. Does anybody else want to add on to that?
Just tacking on to what Johnson said, people believing in you and wanting to get involved. Shark Tank would be a good example of venture capitalist.
Yeah, absolutely. Angela, I saw your hand go up.
I was going to say the same exact thing, that venture capital was more commercial, and bank lending is more for small business or just personal banking needs.
Yeah. And realistically, it can go either way. Oh, I saw another hand go up and then go down. Oh, was that you, Angela?
Yeah, yes, it was an accident. I apologize.
Okay, no problem. It like bops you up to the top, then bops you down really quickly, so it's like hard for me to catch it. But yeah, all of that is very, very true. So the venture capitalist, the piece about like believing in you and wanting to get involved. Typically, when we're thinking about something that's outside of a like a pitch competition in the way that SCORE does it, which is something that has more of like a social benefit philanthropic aim, right? Where they are truly gifting you that money. And that way it's almost more of like a grant competition or grant piece. Typically when we talk about venture capital or taking on an investor. And so that's where, like, yes, when we talk about venture capital and we say like VC, to Angela's point, yeah, that's usually like a little bit of a bigger scale, a larger business. That's like, we really want to scale up. But taking on an investor, you can do at any level. Sometimes that's a friends and family community. Sometimes that's just someone who has an appetite to invest in something. You find someone that is wealthy and has some money and they want to see the return on it. The adage that we say in banking, though, or not in banking, if you talk to anybody about venture capital, if you talk to anybody about private equity, if you talk about these things, it is that venture capital or taking on an investor is the most expensive way. Bootstrapping, which is when you do it all yourself, no lending, no nothing, is the cheapest. But we also usually say banking is cheaper than venture capital. Does anybody have an idea about like why that is that common accepted phrase that banking is cheaper than investment or venture capital? Go for it, Angela.
I would say that the difference would be venture, you would probably have to split some type of percentage of your business ownership. That's a possibility. And versus with regular bank lending, you are just paying them back at an interest rate.
Truly could not have said it better myself. So that is what it is venture capital is more expensive because you're frequently giving them a portion of your business. You're giving X% of this. So you're giving, and it depends on how it's negotiated. I am not the expert in this. So I've had clients navigate and go through these pieces and we kind of talk through that. It really kind of depends on what your goal is for your business, right? If your thought process is, I'm building this business up to sell it, it's not necessarily going to be like what I personally do long term or different things, then that can make so much sense for you because you want a faster trajectory. So you need more cash coming in fast, and giving up that percentage is a little bit, it's different, right? Versus someone that's like, oh no, I want to run this business for 30 years, pass it down to my kids. I don't necessarily want to be beholden to somebody else. So really depends on the structure. And then sometimes I have clients who early on, they own multiple restaurants, and early on they were in a different position when it came to negotiating. And so they negotiated terms that entitled their early on investors who helped them give that start to a pretty significant share of the profits moving forward. They had paid back the original investment in 2 years, and now into perpetuity, they're paying out that larger chunk of their profits to those investors. And so they kind of have that like, well, hindsight is 2020 if I went back, but at the same time, they may not have been able to access that capital starting out another way. So we always say that. We say that it's more expensive because you're giving up a chunk of your business or a chunk of your profits. The better you do, the more money that is typically going to that investor. Whereas you hit the nail on the head with the bank, the best case scenario for the bank, you pay the loan as agreed on time and with the negotiated term that you already had. Best case scenario for the bank or the banker is like, we become friends, we continue doing business together, you become more and more successful, and we stay together until we die. That's the Casey Mulligan ideal scenario, but still the top end best case scenario for the bank in terms of like money that they would receive in exchange for giving you that loan is that you pay the loan back the way that you said that you would. And so that's where we get into the conversation about risk, right? About a venture capitalist can and is looking for more risk because they're looking to say like, hey, I've got money from wealthy sources who have this money that they've set aside as true investments. And what we know about investments are volatile, right? It's why we got big signs on my desk that I'm FDIC insured. If you put money in the bank in a deposit, that money is not allowed to decrease. We'll add interest to it, but it's not allowed to decrease. Whereas you go to our financial investment arm, they're really good at what they do. They're going to grow your money. That's their pledge, but it's volatile. It could decrease. Things could go wrong. So when it comes to that investment piece from the venture capital piece, they're accepting a higher level of risk because they're getting a higher level of reward. And that's what they're built around. The bank, I have, as a bank and as a bank lender, I have a fiduciary obligation that says because banks lend out other depositors money. So they're lending you your neighbor's money for this business. And so we have to vet that really, really well based on historical information. I can't just say, hey, this is a really good idea. You seem like a really great person. I love what you've got going on. I think this sounds like a phenomenal business idea. I want in. Because I can't, because that's the gamble of it, and I'm not allowed to gamble. I have to say, hey, this is a really well presented loan package that you've put together. I can see based on your historical records that you have enough cash flow to pay the loan payment that you're asking for. So I can see historically this is there. I can check and see a couple other factors, and that says that this is a good loan according to our credit policy, which we apply evenly to everyone across the board so that we can make sure everybody's treated fairly. So that's sort of the difference of it, and kind of going into the conversation with that. And that's exactly what this conversation is going to be about, is like, hey, what does that bank care about? What does set me up for success? Helps it become, because a lot of times I'll have conversations with clients where we'll get into lending stuff, and if for some reason the loan can't get approved, we don't have the fact, we don't have the cash flow, we don't have whatever it is, it can feel like what you're being told is, we don't believe in you, we don't believe in your business, we don't believe in your business plan, we don't think you can do it. And in reality, that's not our job, that's not our place to say. That's not at all what that is communicating, but it can feel a lot more like hurt feelings, because it feels like, like if you don't win the pitch competition, that's what they're saying, which is also not true. But it feels a little bit more as though we're casting doubt on what you're capable of or what you can do. And the reality of it is, we were never allowed to gamble on the potential for what might be there. We have that credit policy that holds us accountable to making sure the loan can be paid before we ever put it out there. Personal credit versus business credit, which should be your priority? Anybody got an answer for that one? Angela, I think your hand is up from last time, but if this is a new hand, have at it.
It was up from the last time, but I'll have at it.
Okay.
I believe personal credit and business credit is very important. Both are one and the same.
Okay. Anybody else? I will say I slightly disagree with Angela. I don't think that we should discredit either of them. But I will tell you, in my world, personal credit should absolutely be your priority. At the end of the day, almost all business loans are personally guaranteed by the business owner or owners. Sometimes that is the way that folks can go about getting a loan that they may not independently qualify for. They pull a guarantor. That's even the way that sometimes investors can give value, is that they can guarantee a loan. But at the end of the day, most loans that you're going to encounter for your business, you are going to personally guarantee, and your personal credit can make or break that loan conversation, as long as there's the cash flow, as long as the other factors are there, because that's what we're asking. Because the business could cash flow, right? The business could say, hey, here's all my net income. It's a hefty amount. I've got enough to see this loan payment through. But at the end of the day, the business as an entity is not capable of writing a check and depositing that check to make that loan payment. So we have to go off of something that tells us, how likely is this business loan going to be repaid? And what we need from that is the person who's guaranteeing it, the person whose baby this is, how likely are they going to be to every month on time write a check, type in a number, auto draft, whatever it is, to do that. And the biggest thing that we have, and that tells us that, is that credit score, is that personal credit score. And a lot of the times I'll be working with clients, and sometimes their personal credit will have dipped down. And it's because, honestly, they were throwing everything they had into that business. They were not necessarily paying themselves because they're so focused on keeping this business afloat, making sure it hits all of its stuff, that, you know what, if their credit card payment had to be a little bit late or other things had to happen, they were like, that's the price to pay because I am growing my business and I'm focused on it. Unfortunately, that usually winds up curbing your business's growth, because again, that credit score is what the bank has to go off of to say, this payment is going to get made. This is absolutely going to happen. So, and what I'll say about business credit, if I've got an application, right? And I'm not an underwriter, I'm a lender, but if I have sent it my underwriter an application and it looks like the business can make the payment, the business credit score is good, it's fine, it's acceptable, and the personal credit is unfavorable, that good business, that okay business credit, that good business credit is not going to outweigh that personal credit, because again, the business isn't the one making the payment. So that business credit it gets a lot of hype. And I think it causes people, again, I wouldn't say like, don't worry about it, tank it, don't do it. It still plays a part, because that reverse scenario where you've got personal credit is great and business credit is really bad, that's going to cause us to want to dig into it and be like, hey, how is this showing up here? How is this not? It's less compelling. That personal credit can still kind of outweigh that. But if that business credit is showing like a big default or something like that, that's going to cause us to like pause, dig into it. Hey, what's going on? We need to get to the bottom of this. So I wouldn't totally disregard it. But at the end of the day, the business credit doesn't get reported as thoroughly and kind of like intensely as your personal credit does. So it's a little bit less comprehensive. And it, in that way, then means there's just like less information to go off of. And so it tends to be one of those things that's like, honestly, unless it's really bad, it's not weighing in that much on the whole argument, unless it's really bad and that takes it outside of credit policy, because our credit policy says like, hey, these are the type of loans we're trying to do. These are the parameters. Unless it's bad enough to take it out of there, it's not doing much. It's just kind of like a factor there that's like, hey, pretty good. There's nothing scary on it. So I say that to say personal credit is definitely the one that I would focus on. Also because it's sort of like your canary in the mine, right? That if you're protecting your personal credit, you're also probably thinking pretty intensely about, how am I paying myself? Am I making sure that this business is able to pay me? Am I able to live my life? Is this business going to be able to serve my life and help me improve on what I'm doing? Or am I at the stage where I'm serving the business? Because if you are, that's not really where we want to be. We don't want it to be that your whole life is in service to the business to keep it afloat. We want the business to run and be in service to you living the kind of life that you want, and being able to accomplish the most good that you want to. Okay, collateral versus capacity. Which holds more weight? Anybody want to weigh in on that? Any thoughts on that? Okay. So what I'll say about collateral versus capacity is, does anybody know what do I mean when I say capacity? I'll take it. I feel like my unorthodox take on the last one has scared you guys off of answering. But I promise not to flog you if we disagree. So when I say capacity, what I mean is, and what we're usually talking about is just bare bones, your ability to pay the loan back. That's your capacity, right? Like literally, do you have the extra cash flow in the month to make that monthly payment? Versus collateral, which is, you guys are all familiar with that, you know, in the personal world, that could be a house, that could be a car, that could be, you know, a cash asset. In the business world, this could be your equipment, this could be your building, this could be, sometimes it's your accounts receivable. A lot of the times, and I'll put this in like a personal term, I'll have clients come in and have the conversation and they'll be like, hey, I got a house. I inherited it from my mom. There's no loan on it. It's in East Nashville. It's worth $900,000. I only want $100,000. Can you get me a loan? I'm like, absolutely. Let's talk about where this is coming from. They're like, now, full disclosure, I'm not working right now. I've got, you know, income coming from different sources. I'm not putting it on my tax returns. I'm like getting by, but I don't really have any income to show that I can, you know, pay this back, this loan. And then when the conversation becomes, hey, if we don't really have any monthly income to show you can make the monthly payment, it's really hard. The underwriter's not able to prove that because there isn't the cash flow, there isn't the capacity. And then, you know, sometimes the conversation can be like, what are you talking about? This house is worth $900,000. You're putting $100,000. Let's do $1 million, because I can't do the math on that other number. This house is worth $1 million. This is $100,000. You got 90% equity in there, right? Like I'm only asking for a loan off of 10%. What in the world do you mean you can't give me a loan for that? And the reality of it is I'm not doing a great job of being a lender if I am giving you loans I don't know you can make the payment for, to be honest. And as a lender and as a bank, we are not a real estate company. That's not what we do. So like our nightmare is that we ever have to touch your house. We do not want a house. We're not in the business of selling homes. So if we're going to do a loan, we want to make sure you can pay for it. Now in the business world, same thing. Anybody want to tell me what their business does? Sparkle McKnight, your name is awesome. So I would really like to know what your business does, especially if it has anything to do with anything sparkly. But I will take anyone else's business. All right, Angela, what you got?
All right, so I have a janitorial service that I have paid more into than it has not uplifted me in what you stated earlier. So since then, I have started a veteran supportive housing, where I am taking a home that was passed down to me, and turn it into a supportive housing for vets.
Okay, this does not help me with my analogy because it's the same analogy I did, but that's an amazing business model, Angela, and I love it. But yes, that is exactly to that same point. Like Angela, actually, this works well because I already have those numbers up there. So that's the same thing, right? Like if Angela came and was like, hey, I need a loan and I'll use this house as collateral, but I can't show on paper that Angela has the money coming in to make the payment, it doesn't do Angela any good or me any good to be like, yeah, but I don't care. There's a ton of equity in this house. Let's go ahead and do it. This is not setting anybody up for success. It's not setting Angela up for success. It's giving her a loan that we don't know that she can repay. We don't have a plan to repay it, and putting her that asset at risk. And for me, it's no good because it is not a good thing for us to ever actually have to touch that collateral we're talking about. So capacity, as great as the collateral could be, as great as it could be, Angela, that was perfect because that fed in perfectly to my business thing. I was thinking in my head, there's no way that like a house is going to work for the business model, and you proved me wrong. It's perfect. But yeah, so especially when you come in to talk to the banker and if you've got a really solid piece of collateral, remember, we got to show that capacity, and we got to show it on paper. We got to show that we can make that payment because we want it to be a good loan. And honestly, you want it to be a good loan that makes sense and fits within your budget and fits within your cash flow. So to drill down into this nitty gritty, this is what the underwriter's actually looking at. We've kind of talked about this. So credit score, your personal credit score for loans secured by hard assets. Does anybody know what a hard asset is? Hard asset is like cash, equipment, inventory. Kind of depends on what your inventory is. If it's super niche and we couldn't like easily sell it, like it doesn't really count as hard, right? But you know, like a building, like if you have a building, that is a hard asset. That is something we can really lean against. And it does mitigate some of the risk on the loan. So while I still need to show you can make the payment, it does mean your credit score can be a little bit lower because it is a safer loan. It's more secured. So for a hard asset secured business loan, we're looking at a credit score. We want a credit score of 650 or above. For an unsecured loan or a loan that's secured by like soft assets, which we'll get to in the collateral piece, 681 or above is about where we want your credit score. Cash flow. How many of you all are familiar with the term global debt service coverage ratio? Ashley, you don't count because you do this all the time. So Ashley, I know you're familiar, but anybody else, have you heard debt service coverage ratio or DCSR? Ashley, I wish I hadn't taken you out of the game so you could say, yes, I've heard of it. So how many of you guys have heard the term DTI, debt to income? Yeah. Stacy, Miss Johnson, are you Sharita or Charita?
Sharita.
Sharita. My instincts were on. Okay. So you guys have seen, all right. You guys have seen debt to income. Debt to income is what we typically talk about on the consumer side, right? 45% is usually the number we want to see. And what that means is for every 45 cents or 45 cents of debt that you have monthly, we want at least $1 of income. So a little bit less than half of your income can be a debt. We want everything else to be able to go towards like fulfilling your life. When we talk about this on the business side, which it's a little bit different, and it's a debt service coverage ratio. If we take global out of that, what that means is your net income, so your net operating income after you've paid everything that you got to pay, all your expenses are out there, your net income. If we divide that by your debt coverage, like what you have to divide, and we're looking at it roughly on a monthly scale, a 1 ratio means your net income is, I'm going to use very simple numbers. I don't do math out loud without an Excel spreadsheet. But if your net income is $100 and your monthly debt service is $100, that ratio is 1. And that means you have enough spare income coming in to pay for this new debt service piece. What we want to see is 1.25. So basically, for every bit of your money that isn't accounted for, right? That is your net income, headed towards your profit that you've got. And then for every bit of dollars that need to go towards covering your debt, you've got an extra quarter. So that's what that 1.25 means, is for every dollar of debt, I've got that dollar to pay it plus an extra quarter to go towards functioning life emergencies, building my business. So when we talk about it being global, what that means is we are taking into account your income. Now, if your income is already reflected in the businesses, if your income and the business's net operating income is the same thing, because you don't pay yourself a set amount or do wages, you pay yourself out from the net income or do owner's draws. We don't unfortunately get to double count that. So if those are the same, that's the same. But say you have some income that's separate from this. Say this is your side business and you've got some W-2 income, or say you do, your 1099 for somebody consistently and reliably. We take globally your personal adjusted gross income plus the business's net income, and we add that together, and then we compare that against this new debt that the business is thinking of taking on, plus all the debt that we can see for you on your credit bureau. So that's the global perspective of it. And again, all that I want to see is that for every dollar of this combined debt, you guys have $1 of net income plus a quarter. So 1.25. Anything above that, we're golden. Anything below 1.25, and especially if the closer we get to that 1-to-1 number, it means you have just enough, and that isn't safe within credit policy. So that is how that cash flow piece is calculated from the business perspective. Collateral, we kind of talked about this: hard assets, cash, equipment, real estate, inventory. Sometimes really depends. It depends on what you sell and what the resale value is for it. And there's some inventory that it means a lot when you have it because you're really good at selling your thing. It doesn't mean as much for us to have it. And then there's other things that are it's just I don't know, if your inventory is gold bars, that's pretty easy to calculate off of. So inventory can go either way. Soft assets tend to be accounts receivable, your office furniture, your electronics, computer, hardware, software, produce. If your inventory is produce, we're going to call that a soft asset because, to be honest, it's going to go bad so quickly that by the time that we would seize it, we couldn't sell it. So that one goes into the softer produce category. So when we're talking about business lending and we're wanting to secure it against something, hard assets, we can give you, if you came in and you were hey, I've got, cash, equipment, real estate, inventory, all this stuff, I've got $100,000 of it, I can usually get closer to that 100,000. 75% is typically what we talk about being a sweet spot. But if it's really a hard asset, if it's cash, we'll go 1-to-1. You got $100,000 in your money market and you don't care if we put a hold on it, I'll give you a $100,000 loan. That's easy. Cash is super easy. Real estate, we're usually able to go to 80%, maybe 85%. Your building is worth this. I can loan you out up to 85% of that if it's in a specialty census tract. If it's in a certain area, there's community development products that mean that you can put less cash down or be able to take more out. If it's soft, if it's accounts receivable, if it's office furniture, if it's those pieces, it's going to be probably below 75%, but maybe right around there, maybe right around that 75% piece. So you've got $100,000 in accounts receivable. I can do a line of credit for $75,000, assuming I can show the cash flow for that payment, for that level of payment. Those are your big three. And you don't have to have collateral. There is a lot of unsecured business lending, unsecured business line of credit. Best advice I could give any person on earth, ask for that before you need it. Qualify for that business line of credit because you only pay on what you use, and you don't get charged for it just for having it there. Ask for it when you don't need it because you're in your strongest borrowing position. At the point that you really, really need it, you may not look so good on paper. You may have ramped up personal credit cards to kind of compensate and do some spending. Your balances may be low. You may have overdrafted your account. You may be sitting in the negatives. It is not a helpful thing, because one of the first things my underwriter does when they go to evaluate it, if you got an account with us, is they're looking at your account. They're looking at your balances. They're looking at your history. If you are overdrawn, this and it was already borderline, this is tough. Let us not do that. So, and Bisney Bass is not on here, but I know she's participated at all these things heavily. Her big advice that she comes back to time and time again is, do not quit your first job to leap into your next job until, one, you're absolutely certain you can replicate what you need to survive from an income standpoint, and two, until you've gotten the funding you've needed, because you are a much stronger borrower when you have income that is separate from the business. Because when when an underwriter is looking at a business loan, and your personal income and the business's income are one and the same, right? If the business has a bad month, that means you're having a bad month. And we don't have anything outside of that that's sort of safe and insulated and buffered from that. That's a lot more volatility. That's a lot more risk, versus if you're saying like, hey, yeah, I've got this business, it's going, here's what I'm investing into it. But don't forget, I've got a tidy W-2 salary over here that I can also rely on monthly. That is a great insulating factor for, qualifying through underwriting. These last two, these are the 5 C's of credit, in case you, if you've heard that before. That's basically what these are. Credit score used to be called character, which I think sounds awful. That it's like, ooh, what's your character? Does it relate to your credit score? That sounds terrible. That is not your credit score is not your character as a person. Things happen. There is systemic injustice and poverty and so many factors at play that your credit score is certainly not your character. Your credit score is a story of historically what has happened when you have borrowed money. It is a story you can start rewriting at any point in time. You can start a new compelling narrative today or at any point. So most of us shy away now from calling that character because it sounds crazy. That's not your character. It is your credit score. It does tell us historically what you have done with money when you borrowed it. We have a fiduciary obligation to do loans that we have a very high to reasonable expectation will be repaid. And we use credit score as one of those big factors. But we also have a lot of tools in our toolkit to help get you there if it's not there today. These other two are more in the nuance realm, I would say. They can come into play. But for the most part, those are your big 3. If we can clear the credit score hurdle, the cash flow hurdle, and if collateral is at play, collateral works, those are our big 3. For the most part, if those things qualify, we're in business, baby. Conditions, we're talking about, hey, is your business, what's the trend, right? Like, have you been consistently growing year over year, or have you been going down? That can be alarming for an underwriter to see if they're looking at the last 3 years and the trend has been down. Now, we do have concerns about, hey, if we're looking at this historically, we probably have a reasonable expectation that it's going to trend down again. Now, sometimes there's more into those financials that are helpful to see, that say like, hey, here's why that was true. Here's why net income. I made some really big investments. I did a whole rebrand. I did all that. So there's more to the story, and that's really helpful if we can get that. But still, that takes into factor. And then the economy. Bankers love to talk about the economy. My buddy Drew, who does outsourced CFO work, was in here earlier. And every time I start to talk about like, he's like, listen, bankers and economists have predicted 12 of the last 5 recessions. So I don't want to hear you guys naysaying it, but that is a part of it, right? We're paying attention to economic factors. We're paying attention to what's going on. There's been different times. During 2020, our SBA team and a lot of the SBA folks were very hesitant. And Jackie, I know you're here. Jackie, for those of you who have not met the sweetest woman in the world, Jacqueline Merritt, who has a 30+ year history with the SBA, and is definitely the only person who should ever be speaking about the SBA. But for us, during 2020, we would have clients that wanted loans for new restaurants. And at our time, we were maxed out for the capacity. And we could not, there was probably like a 6-month window where we were not able to get like new restaurant loans approved in 2020 because of the factors that were at play. So conditions can definitely play a part in it. And they can help or weaken your case. But again, this is sort of like a next tier quality and something that typically comes in, especially when you're at like a big commercial level too. And then capital. How much have you already invested in the business yourself is a part of the conversation about. So a lot of times there's a lot of myths about startup loans of people being like, I want one of those startup loans. And I got to tell you, in my experience, there are loans that can be used to start up your business. And there are loans that can be used when you're relatively new in business. I don't have at my disposal a product that is designed for, this is a new business that I have never done before and that I don't have like additional income outside of it guaranteeing it, but I've got a really good idea. Can I have one of those startup loans? I don't have access to anything like that. And even if you Google it, a lot of the times, back to Jackie, it'll say like SBA 7A, which can be a little bit misleading. 7A can definitely, like if you're buying a franchise, if you're doing these things, but it's not that the SBA necessarily has like a big resource that's like, oh, hey, you want to start a new business? Absolutely. Here's that classic startup loan. But I think part of what happens is you hear people getting loans to start their business, and not everybody is always disclosing, hey, I own my house and I used a home equity line of credit on my own house to, take out that money and invest into myself and invest into my business to help start up. Hey, I'm married and my spouse has income that's separate from this business venture. They're also a guarantor on that loan, and they changed the cash flow workup. Hey, I've got a wealthy family member who loved the idea of what I was doing and loves me and wanted to help invest and either guaranteed or gave me some cash to start it up or gave me a personal loan to do those things. People aren't always talking about that, about like some of the assistance that they've had or some of the legs up or some of the things that they've been fortunate enough to have acquired or done. And so sometimes it feels like, oh, well, the bank must just like them better, or they just must be, better at these things. And I think the reality of it is when we frequently pull back the layers, there was something there that made the credit score and the cash flow and the collateral work. And that's how that bank was able to give them that loan. It was not necessarily that they just liked their business better. But sometimes I think people can get a little in, like, they don't want to necessarily disclose assistance they've received or done. And so sometimes it just sounds like, I just got a loan. And we don't hear that kind of backstory. But I will say about capital, like I had a client who I love, who's like a serial entrepreneur. She'll be entrepreneuring till she dies. And we were talking about like her doing a loan for one of her businesses. And I was like, yeah, talking about the personal guarantee thing. And she's like, oh, I don't want to personally guarantee it. What if the business goes under? And I was like, ma'am, do you think that the bank is going to feel any more confident in lending you money than you feel about your business staying afloat? And I think sometimes we just get disconnected from it, right? We're like, oh yeah, just give us one of those loans. And at the end of the day, there's a little bit of truth to how much have you invested? How much of your own cash have you put into it? How much skin do you have in the game? So we'll go to our next piece, standard financial package. And I will wrap through this because I talk too much and I talk too long and we're already at 12:45. So standard financial package. If I'm going to put in a loan application for you, here is what I need. 2 years tax returns, personal and business. If you are a single member LLC, a sole prop, that's probably one and the same. You're probably not going to have a separate business tax return unless you have multiple partners and we've got some K1s, or you're a S corp or something like that. Yes, I'm getting Ashley Brooks's approval and she is a hot shot at what she does. So I will take it all day long. But yeah, so most of the time that's going to be one and the same. I just say personal and business so clients know I need 2 years of whatever you've got in a tax return format. A profit and loss statement. Can anybody succinctly supply what a profit and loss statement is? I'll say it. So profit and loss statement is essentially to a business what your personal accounting of your budget is over a certain time span. So, oh yeah, Ashley. Okay, thank you. I was waiting for you. Summary of income and expenses to reflect net profit or loss. Absolutely. And on my end, 1 to 2 pages of detail is about perfect, right? If you can show me, it's already almost October. So if I'm going to do a business loan, the last official thing I'm going to have on paper is probably in dated 12/31 of 2023. I've got like 9.5 months of activity that I'm not seeing if I'm just looking at tax returns. So that profit and loss statement is honestly one of the things that, if it's being well kept up throughout the year, is going to be super helpful for your personal tax prep or your Ashley Brooks tax prep, because it's going to give me an accounting of where all your money has come from, different sources, and where it has gone out, and what has been left as the net income, which, as you'll recall, I need to know that number because that's what we're going to use to calculate your cash flow and make sure you can qualify for the loan. So a year-to-date profit and loss statement. If you're using QuickBooks or a tool like that, it'll generally prep one for you, but you do have to get in there pretty frequently and correct it and say, hey, no, this charge was actually this actually goes here. Same thing with your personal budget, right? If anybody's ever used a personal budget finance software, you got to get in there pretty regularly and be like, no, that was not actually a credit card payment. That was a thing I paid to have my dog groomed, whatever. So you got to get in, you got to reconcile it. That's why working with a bookkeeper when you can afford it, or working with it as it works, can really help, because unless you're a small business owner like Ashley, who set out to start a accounting and tax prep firm, it's probably not your strongest suit because it's not anybody but those people's. So if you can get to work with someone, they can help prep these. And then it's super great if you can put us in touch. We can just be best friends and chat and send financials back and forth. A balance sheet, that's going to lay out for me remember when we talked about like, hey, hard assets, soft assets, can I secure against that? I get all of those answers from your balance sheet. Your balance sheet tells me what you've got that I can secure against. Your balance sheet tells me you've got, $25,000 in equipment. Great. I can collateralize off of that, so accounts receivable, those pieces. And that picture changes wildly, but giving us a stamped on this date perspective of your balance sheet, that's what I need for collateral. And then a personal financial statement. This is one where it can be annoying and lengthy to do. I recommend that you find a time, sit down for 15 minutes and just be like, I'm going to knock this out. And a personal financial sheet puts all of your money, all of your sources of income, all of your debt, all of your assets, all of everything on 1 to 2 pages. There's a ton of like, hey, what do you have in here? I have seen wild personal financial statements. I've seen someone that had $6 million in furs on their personal financial statement. Absolutely wild to me. And gross. I don't need it. So, but that's going to give us hey, at a snapshot, can I look at what makes up you as a person? All of these different factors. It's one of the things that goes in there to show that you've got that firm financial standing, how you're doing. It's also really helpful because you might come to me and say, I really want to do this thing, and here's the way I want to do it. And I can look at your personal financial statement and say, hey, I found another thing on here. You didn't realize it. We can probably use this asset, get you exactly what you wanted. We're just going to use a different way that maybe you didn't know about that'll save you some money. And that's my job. I don't expect you to know everything about lending. I don't even expect me to know everything about lending. I just expect me to know where to find out everything I need to know about lending. So personal financial statement, these are the 4 things we're going to need to do a business loan for you. Negotiating, always ask. Have a banker that you trust. Talk to them about it. Be respectful, build that relationship, build rapport with them so that you can say, hey, can I get this rate lowered? Is this a thing? Can we do this? Usually it's a method of like, hey, I can ask for special permission to get this rate lower, but no, if I already have to get exceptions on length of business history or these other things, I might have run out. I only have so many chips. I only have so many spoons, and I got to allocate them. But like, let's figure out what's important. Let's see what we can try and get done, and figure out, nurture your relationship and ask questions to understand, like, how does this credit policy work? Where are the places where exceptions can be made and where they can't be made? Because consumer protection federal regulation is something that I am a huge fan of. I love it. It protects people. It also cuts both ways. It means we can't give special treatment to, in the same way that I can't give sorry if anybody's on the call, we're not on camera, so I don't know, but I can't give special treatment to a straight white male to do this thing. But it also sometimes means I can't give special treatment to a LGBTQ woman of color owning her own business, unless it fits in with like a special program we've built into our credit policy and that we apply across the board for everybody that fits into that bucket. So that's what community development does. They do say, hey, are you earning at a low to moderate income level? Can we give you special treatment for if you fit into that realm? Is your business in, or do you personally live in? Are you living in and investing in a community of color that we measure by census tract? Great. I've got some special products. I can do that, but they have to be applied evenly across the board. So the better your rapport is with your banker, the more questions you can ask, the better you can have an understanding of where is there wiggle room and where is there not, and how do I get this to work out best for me. All right. I've talked too long. We're going to skip past this. This is less important on what we were talking about, except for Ashley's piece over here. Oh, Sharita. Okay. So I'm going to say this piece, then bounce back to that. So bail, I think I stole this from you, Ashley, at some point in time. And if I did, take credit for it. But can you make bail? And that is, do you have a banker, an accountant, an insurance person you respect and trust, and a lawyer person? You don't have to have them all at once. You don't have to have them on retainer. That's super expensive. But you need to start vetting and building a network that includes, I don't know why I can't, that's easier to do for. Those 4 people, having someone you really trust who is an expert who you know is not going to lead you astray. Those 4 quadrants are really, really important, because you got to have somebody you can trust, because it is way too hard for you to be an expert in all of those things. I am not an expert in any of those things except banker. So I can dabble or touch on accountant, but I'm going to very quickly refer you back to your person who has spent all of their time, energy, money, and resources learning and becoming equipped to give you the best advice. Same for insurance, same for attorney. Again, you won't need them all the time. You won't need them all at the same stage, but eventually you're going to want to build a network that has all of those things as your business grows. To Sharita's question, I'm going to just leave that screen there. That's my contact information if you want it. To Sharita's question, how do you respectfully ask those questions as the business owner?
May I ask you why? Well, may I clarify why I asked that question in that way?
Yeah.
So we aren't on camera, but it is, for me, I am a Black woman, 100% disabled combat veteran, and I would like to be able to utilize those things to my advantage when it comes to lending options that are available. But I understand from the perspective that you showed that it is a means and a way, and there are programs and there are not exceptions being made. So I want to figure out how do I approach lenders with that information without forcing it down their throat, because that is one of the main reasons that I did attend this, because I do have reservations about presenting my business to others. I have a produce business and it's called Veteran Veggies. And because of the type of business that it is, like you shared, it's produce, it goes bad pretty quickly. But to have a market in place, and I don't have another job. This is my primary job, but I also do have some income, and it is about right at the 6-figure range per year, but I also have a lot of debt. So again, how do you, being a person with that type of quote unquote character before credit score, how do you present that to the lenders in a meaningful, respectful way that also advocates for who you are, the experiences that you had are not the experiences that you plan to move forward with?
So we got a bunch in there, and that's awesome. And that, I love that business model. So what the first step would be kind of figuring out what it is that you want from the bank, like that you identified, like, hey, honestly, I've crunched the numbers on it. The thing that would be the most helpful for me would be $25,000 line of credit, because I need to do that. And again, this goes back to like building that relationship. So you find a banker that you trust, that you know is going to talk honestly with you, that you know is going to be an expert in this, and you talk to them about like, hey, here's my goal. Here's where I want to get. Here's how I think I want to get there. Is that the best path? And they can kind of weigh in and be like, hey, here's a product you maybe didn't know existed. Here's an option. Here's this. Normally when I have a client who is in this position and this is what they're needing, this is typically the kind of thing that they're needing. And then the next question is, okay, well, what does it take to qualify for that? Okay, great. It takes these specific pieces. So if, like we talked about, like that credit score piece, if credit score is low and lower than where we need it to be, well, then we talk about like, hey, what kind of time frame are we on? Do we have time to kind of work on that credit score and get it there? We've got resources with Financial Empowerment Center. We've got our own ability to kind of weigh in and just be like, hey, look, pulled your credit, look at these things. Here's what I would kind of tackle. But Financial Empowerment Center, again, is great. If it's something where we can't get it done today, one of my first calls is going to be John Eisen over at Pathway Lending. And I'm going to say, hey, I couldn't get it done. Here's what happened. Do you have something that could, and Pathway's whole goal is to say, Pathway operates as a community development financial institution. So their goal is for folks who at the time do not qualify for conventional lending at a bank because it doesn't fit within credit policy. And we really can't build a strong enough case around it to have it fit within that credit policy. Pathway says, all right, well, we've got some, as a nonprofit in this realm, we've got some special allocations, we can maybe do it. And through lending with them, the goal is to help you grow, repair, do whatever needs to be done that you can then bop back up and come back into conventional lending. Their terms are usually not going to be quite as good as a conventional lender's, but it's going to help it get done. It's going to help you get where you need to be, and then you can come back. So it's usually a lot of like back and forth and kind of like we stay your team on the whole thing. So that is part of it. And then Sharita, to your point of asking like, hey, I do have these specific qualifications. Well, then sometimes that might come into lending. Sometimes that might come into play in other opportunities that might be available to you. I'm not an expert in it, but saying like, hey, let's do a little cursory research. Is there a grant that you could apply for that's going to let you be able to get some income coming in that isn't even necessarily in the form of a loan? Are there specific lending things like SBA does have, provisions that have been made for veterans for those pieces? So we say, hey, Jackie, I'm not an expert in this. Jackie, what do you guys have? What does anything look like? Jackie put in Pathway Lending's websites right there with both of those pieces. So a lot of that is too, when you're picking your banker, you also want to pick somebody who's got that network and got that kind of knowledge and connection, because it doesn't, if the answer is I can't get you the best thing for you right now, my next answer doesn't need to be, sorry, see you later. It needs to be, I can't get you the best thing for you right now. Here's how I can help you get there. But also here's a couple of different options we can look at that can help you out today because they're equipped differently or they're doing that. But a big part of the piece I will say comes into, comes into saying, do you know what it is that you want? Do you know what would do you the best good? Because just saying like a blanket, I want money, is not helpful to a lender and not really helpful to you. What we really want to know is if you're borrowing, everybody kind of wants to know what's the plan for that money. We never want to borrow for borrowing's sake. We want to know, are you borrowing money so that you can increase your revenue, so that you can improve on your margins, so that you can get a better, are you borrowing, are you using a line of credit so that you can buy more things in bulk and lower your cost and increase your margin and then have more net income? So we also kind of want to know what's the plan with the money that you're borrowing, because if there is no plan, money will get spent, right? Like that's just the churn and burn of the business piece. So if there is no plan, it's going to go, and it may not necessarily go in the way that sets you up the best for success. Ashley asked, are there specific questions to ask when choosing a lender prior to pitching? All lender banks aren't created equal. Yeah, you want to get to know people. You want to get to know their business, right? Like Casey Mulligan, I might be a stellar person and a pinnacle, a very moral person. If I work for an organization that doesn't have those same shared values, I can't guarantee you that I can always operate the way that I want to. So you kind of want to vet the banks, you want to vet the different organizations, and you want to vet the people that you're talking to make sure that they are experienced enough, that they are qualified. Ask for referrals from your friends. Ask for them if you've got a banker that you kind of want to talk to, and you know that they've got other clients or other people having experience with them. Talk to those people about what their real life experiences have been like with that person. Check to see how long they've stayed with their organization. What's their staying power? Those kind of pieces that say, hey, if I start working with you today, am I still going to be able to work with you in a year, 2 years, 5 years? Okay, I went over on time, and it's probably just because Michelle can't. Yes, see, Michelle has said it is 1 o'clock. So out of respect for everybody's time, I will go ahead and cap it. Michelle, I'm sorry you're on mute because I know there's a bunch of things that are up on the horizon that people would love to come to, but I am assuming that will come to you guys in the form of an email, so that you all can sign up and attend. And then I think she's going to send out a video, and I will send my slide deck. That is my contact information. You are welcome to reach out to me anytime. I'm always happy to chat through stuff. There is nothing that gets me more excited than business development chats. Love them. So that is it for me at the moment. Michelle, I'm so sorry you were on mute and you couldn't cut me off in a timely fashion. All right. Bye, guys.